Evening, everyone. Welcome back to the HMA Law Firm channel here on YouTube. And I'm pleased to introduce today a very special guest, Mr. Herbert Hernandez, who is one of our case managers, an office manager, and wears a lot of hats at our firm. And today we're going to be talking about something that has been on everyone's mind, and unfortunately that we've seen a lot of delays on as well, and that is el permiso de trabajo, the work permit, also known as the EAD, employment authorization documents. So we're going to talk about EADs, what they are, how to apply for them, what documents you need, and talk a little bit about the delays that we're seeing from USCIS and what we can expect. And at our firm, Herbert handles almost all of the filings for all of the EADs for the various cases that we've had. So there's nobody else that knows this stuff better than he does. So Herbert, please introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Herbert Hernandez. I am the office manager for the HMA Law Firm. Since the main question is regarding the EADs or the work permits, yes, they are taking a while. Usually we end up getting a lot of different work permits that we have to prepare for different clients, and they each vary depending on what category they go, as well as what the client is needing the work permit for. So we have different ones. The main ones that we see the most have to do with asylum cases. Once we file their asylum cases, it used to be that they had to wait 1 year prior, once 2020 in August started. And recently, actually on the 8th of February this year, they changed that so they no longer have to wait 1 year for filing for after their asylum case, their 589. They only have to wait 6 months. So most of our clients themselves, we explain to them the process, the documents needed, and everything else to get them ready before we file and prepare their work permits. And this is the category C8. So if they never had an actual work permit, we explain the process, what comes with a work permit, and what I would say opens some doors for certain clients, especially when it comes to having an actual work permit for the first time.
So how long are work permits usually given for these days, Herbert?
So in general, the normal asylum case work permits, they're approved for 2 years. So once the 2 years are up, prior to that, usually within 5 months, we try to get in contact with the client to see if they need us to assist them with renewing the work permit. And as I mentioned earlier, they are taking a while, so we want to make sure we file on time. We always ask the documents that are needed from the client themselves to avoid having further delays. They do get an extension, but at the same time, it doesn't mean their work permit will be approved fast as we expect it to be.
So that's an important point actually about the extensions, because that is true, you know, for C8, which are pending asylum work permits, and also the extensions for C9 and various other categories. But there's like 20 or so categories of work permits, and not all of them actually have the automatic extension, which basically you get if you file the renewal of the work permit before the current work permit expires. So it gets complicated. And I know we've had clients who've come to us, and consults that I've had, you know, we've had to deal with people who cannot benefit from that automatic extension, and some people who've even had to have been taken off of payroll. And I'll bet this happens a lot more than even we're aware of. And it's a real shame that USCIS is taking so long on something that really shouldn't take a long time to grant, because it's a simple application.
Yes, definitely. So what we try to avoid, one is of course making sure that their cases get delayed, especially for the work permits. If it's a first-time work permit, the main things that we request the client is to make sure that we file in the given time, meaning the 150 days. We start the process itself. This is mostly with the pending asylums, the C8s. If they're renewing the work permits themselves, again, we make sure they get notified within the 5 months, and we begin asking the general questions.
Right.
Especially for C8s, we have to check to see if they had any criminal issues within the last 2 years. The reason I say 2 years is because your work permit is valid for those 2 years. In those 2 years, they check to see if you had any issues prior. They checked in the past when you initially file your work permit, when you came into the country, for any criminal background that they have for you, but then it starts moving forward with just 2 years to review because they already have you in the system. They're not going to bother reviewing it, but it doesn't mean that we're not going to mention it. So if you had an actual charge in the past, we always have to let them know that you've had that. And we always double check with the clients to make sure if you had a ticket, even if it's the smallest ticket, just let us know. It's better to know than assume that you don't have a ticket and then find out later on the USCIS says you're not approved for your work permit because you failed and you lied in an application. So it's better to say yes and provide a proof of a parking ticket or a speeding ticket with proof that you paid it and be able to actually get it approved for the 2 years, then actually wait 8 months, 10 months and find out that you're not eligible for a work permit. And now, like Hassan said, you have issues with the employer, you can no longer work. You're out of status and continuing legally working in the US. And then it's a longer process to obtain the EAD again, the work permit.
Yeah, and even if they do wind up approving it, if it's like a minor charge, it's a waste of time because they could easily send a request for evidence. I'm not sure if that's ever happened with any of our cases, but as we try to be as complete as possible when we file, but it'd be a waste of time for USCIS to send a request for evidence asking you to send a copy of something that you could have submitted at the very beginning and save that extra time of processing. So
no, we haven't had any issues with those. Most of the ones we try to avoid from the beginning, and we always double check with the client before sending it and before we actually verify everything as well. So we
right. Yeah, because it is an application. I mean, under penalty of perjury, just like all immigration applications are. And so you want to make sure that everything on there is accurate. And if you're sure that everything is accurate, you look over it again and make sure that everything is accurate again, because you just can't be too careful when it comes to sending documentation to the federal government. So what are some of the delays that we've been seeing? Like, give us an idea of the different types of work permits, Herbert, and how long they're taking these days.
So in general, we're basically going to focus more on renewals itself because there's a variety and it's more in depth with it than first time the work permit. So for renewals, we have multiple ones that we work with that I work myself personally. So we had just the regular ones, the asylum, pending cases for asylum, the 589s, the C8s. We have the family-based ones, which is the C9s as well. We have the withholding of removal. They're basically done with their immigration case. Unfortunately, they were not granted asylum, but they were granted a stay in the US and they're allowed to apply for a work permit.
Yeah, allowed to work, right.
Consider that one the work permit for life, technically. As long as you're in good status, you're able to renew the work permit. It's good, but it's not what the client would have expected, but it's honestly better than having no work permit like other people would like to have. The other ones, of course, if some of them have had, it's the DACA renewals. They still have that. We're no longer doing the TPS for Central America itself at the moment. They basically have been extended. So they're not actually renewing that actual document. But the main ones we see, the C8s for pending asylum, C9 family-based.
Those are the most common ones, right?
Those are the most common ones itself. Yeah. So the delays on those, it's in general, prior 2020, August, I would say, their approval ratings for those were between 4 to 6 months wait when we initially filed those cases. So they were extended to 6 months after we filed. The client could continue working at their employer. They wouldn't have any issues, and then they will receive the work permit, and it will be valid for 2 years. The case was easily done. Now, after August 2020, we started seeing that they were delayed. One, of course, with COVID, the cases were backlogged. A lot of people were filing for more cases, more work permits. So, and they were short-staffed, of course, with USCIS. But at the same time, instead of allowing them to renew with no issues in their record, they put the cases on hold. The cases would pass the 6-month extension. We would try to contact the USCIS in writing or even a phone call. And the main thing is the case is pending, they're being reviewed. Now we have the client that we had at least 4 months prior their expiration of the work permit and another 6 months extension, that's exactly 10 months, and nothing has been done. So now they're out of status in a way with their work permits. So, and there's not exact document that's needed to update their case. Their documents are basically in order. We provided the documents needed basically to renew their work permits, and communicating with USCIS, they don't really mention what's actually missing. We rarely get that you forgot to mention, you forgot to include a filing fee, or a passport photo is incorrect, or a document is not clear. We haven't seen them often because we always, again, we double check to make sure the photo is correct. They don't have any issues, criminal issues. Their filing fees are correct, and their photos, work permits, license, or even their biographical page for their passport page itself, they're clear enough, even in color, to
Yeah.
avoid any delays itself. And again, there's no explanation as to why they're taking so long, and unfortunately, a lot of clients are getting affected by that. And all we can do is just communicate in writing with USCIS and via phone calls. But again, just because we can call them, we also have to follow the guideline that they have set up for us, which is we can only communicate with them once the 6 months have passed from the initial filing, which is located in the actual receipt notice that we get, and the client should be able to have a copy as well.
I'm hoping it doesn't come to that we have to wind up filing a federal lawsuit just over a work permit delay. But I mean, I've been doing this for almost 20 years now, and I can't remember a time when work permits were this badly delayed. I mean, this has been one of the worst times for work permits, which I remember when they would come in a month, 2 months, for a lot of cases, they were given up to 3 months. And
Yeah.
it used to be you could get an interim work permit that would carry you if they took more than 90 days to make a decision on a work permit. If for whatever reason it rarely did, but even if it did, you could walk into USCIS and get a temporary work permit to cover you until the real, physical work permit arrived. All of that has been taken away, and so clients are just left with no choice. They just have to wait and wait and wait, and then faced with the unhappy prospect of potentially even filing a lawsuit just to get USCIS to do their job.
Yes. I would
It's
say
really
the
insane.
main thing that they would do, I understand that it's taken a while for the work permits, but if they would at least be able to have it in their initial receipt notice, where it actually lets you know, by the way, you have 180-day extension or 6-month extension on that actual current pending work permit, if they could just switch it and give it a year. If it will take more than 6 months, allow the client to have one more year of continuous work, legally work in the US, while they're pending the work permit, while you are able to provide.
Yeah, like they do with the 751 receipt notices, right? Or the I-90s, right?
Yes,
No, that's a
they
really great
absolutely
idea,
don't.
Herbert. I mean, we should
But
actually probably take that up.
so
At the
that's
very least, if you can't approve it in time, at least put it on the notice. Can you,
yes.
if they can be troubled to do that, to put it on the notice and change the language and say you're good for 1 year
Because
because
at
we're
least
behind.
that would give chance for actually the employers to allow this person to continue working for them, and it actually is valid proof that says you can continue work while
Right,
you allow us to take longer than the usual 6 months, and
right.
they would be able to actually finish a lot more cases, I think, with that one simple update on a letter.
And some people wouldn't be, taken off a payroll and losing their jobs,
Yes.
by people who are afraid. I mean, this has real effects on people and just needless stress on. Anyway, what are the kinds of last thing we should talk about? Other kinds of documents that we attach in work permit applications.
So for work permit applications in general, doesn't really matter the category that you're filing, except the withholding of removal or DACA. So just the general ones, the C8s, pending asylum, and C9s, the family-based applications itself. The main documents that we as the firm request from them, if we don't have in our file, it's the
Mhm.
main ones that we ask. A copy of the work permits, a copy of the biographical passport page, the most recent one if they can, or I usually try to ask myself, and instead of requesting the passport page, I always encourage the client to one, either get a state ID, state issue ID, or get a driver's license. I prefer the client to have a driver's license to show that they're more involved in the state that they're living than not having a document. And it also shows USCIS that the client has more than one ID to provide to them if it's needed. I understand a few clients are not able to obtain a passport, which is perfectly fine. But if they're able to get a state issue ID or a license by the time they get their first work permit, then it should help them. So their work permit, a license or ID or passport page, as well as a copy of their social security card. The reason we include that one itself is again to show proof that they have a social, and it is mentioned in the application if they have one, they have to put the numbers, but seeing the numbers and the actual document in their application helps the process move forward without having any difficulties in document wise.
Good stuff. Well, I think that's all really great information. And as always, we'd encourage all of our watchers to feel free to contact us at the links posted below. In case you have any questions, take the time to at least make sure you're doing it right, because there's probably a lot of things that even were brought up just in this video that you might not have thought about when it comes to filing for a work permit. And given how important it is, and given the penalties for working without authorization in the United States, you want to make sure you do it right. We're here to help, and always remember that prosperity is a human right. Thanks so much for tuning in, and thank you, Herbert, for joining us today.